I really have just three main points I want to touch on real quickly this morning in this evaluation that we did last year. The first main point for the group is really to understand that water in the Colorado River, surface water in the Colorado River, is essentially fully appropriated. This doesn't mean that no one could ever get a permit again in the Colorado, but during drought conditions, if all of the existing permitted water rights are fully exercised at their authorized levels, there wouldn't be enough water to supply everyone all the water that they have the right to get. So what that means is that any additional reductions in flows in the Colorado could have an impact on existing senior water rights holders. So groundwater pumping, reducing flows in the Colorado River could potentially have an impact on existing surface water rights in the Colorado River. The second main point I really want to talk about is the work that was done to try to understand what the ecological needs of the Colorado River are. I'm sure many of you are aware of the Senate Bill 3 process that we went through several years ago, where groups of experts were brought together and stakeholder processes similar to these to consider all of the available information about the ecological health of this river and develop these standards that were ultimately adopted by TCEQ. But I want to really emphasize that unlike almost everywhere else in the state, there had been significant amount of scientific work done in the Colorado River, largely as part of an earlier water development project proposal with LCRA and SAWS, where we went out and collected site-specific information at 10 locations between the city of Austin and the coast to develop really state-of-the-art hydrodynamic models. We collected fisheries information and water quality information, sediment transport information. There is a great deal of work coming up with these recommendations. They were not something that a group of people sat around the table and decided this was just the best we could do. There's a lot of information to support this data, and it went through a very rigorous process, both when the studies were done and when the SB3 process happened. Not everybody agreed that these were the perfect numbers. Some people thought they should have been higher. Some people thought they should have been lower. But we developed standards in this basin that I think everyone recognizes have a real strong scientific foundation. And what these standards essentially said was that we need to maintain certain levels of flows all the time, and then we need to have some variability in base flows to create habitats to support the ecological communities within the Colorado River. So there's a lot of work that went into understanding what the flow needs need to be in the Colorado, and they're really pretty strong science behind them. The final point I want to make is that because the Colorado River is fully appropriated, in part, but also just the way that water is used, these standards, the idea with some of these recommendations were that we would expect to see certain flows at certain frequencies. So what are called the base, I think they're the base dry flows ought to occur about 60% of the time, and the base average flows ought to occur about, the base dry ought to occur about 80% of the time, the base average ought to occur about 60% of the time at various sites along the river. When we run the WAM models just as is, without any change due to future pumping, we already see that we're not meeting these targets at the levels that the scientists would have said are needed to maintain the health of the river. Any further reductions in the flows in the river, and I understand that there's been some discussion, and I certainly agree with it, that there's a lot of uncertainty in doing these quantitative assessments, but even qualitatively, reductions in flows in the Colorado River will make a situation that is already not meeting the objectives of the study worse.